Hello, and welcome back to the Loco Files. In today's episode, we'll be looking at the Raven A2. The North Eastern Railway's development of express passenger locomotives was held up by the First World War, but resumed in 1921 with the development of the very successful Raven Atlantic C7 class. Greater power and acceleration was required for the increasing loads on the East Coast Main Line, and hence Raven developed the C7 into a Pacific. Authorization to build the first two locomotives was received at Darlington on the 30th of March 1922, with the line drawings being published in July of that year to counter the publicity of the appearance of the Great Northern Railway's First Pacific. Both were recorded as delivered by December 1922, in time for the grouping of Britain's railways in 1923. Although number 2400 was still in shop grey, and number 2401 did not run until January 1923. Raven created the A2 by stretching his C7 design. The cylinder size was increased, as was the boiler diameter. A wide firebox was fitted which spread out over the trailing wheels. Although the grate was slightly shortened, this wider firebox had to be behind the driving wheels, resulting in a further increase in length. The length of the resulting engine proved to be a significant restriction on the route availability of the engine. To counteract the adverse effects of longer boiler tubes, some of the tubes were increased in diameter, and the boiler pressure was increased from 175 to 200 psi. The three-cylinder drive on the front coupled axle was kept from his C7 design, as was the valve arrangements and steam passages, which were a handicap to the required handling of large volumes of steam. The choice of 3 sets of independent Stephenson valve gear, in contrast to the A1's conjugated valve gear, had to be fitted in a confined space, which resulted in limited bearing sizes. This proved satisfactory for the C7s, but the bearings on the A2 valve gear were expected to handle significantly more power. The A2s had a number of issues and were the biggest engines the North Eastern Railway ever built, but few could claim it was their best. Opinion at the time of development was that the A2s were rushed, so that they could be completed before the NER ceased to exist. It should also be remembered that Raven had different thoughts as to how the East Coast Main Line express passenger services should be developed. Concurrent to the A2 development, Raven was also trying to build a 464 electric locomotive to haul 450-ton passenger trains at speeds of up to 90 miles per hour. One of the big what-ifs of British railway history is how things would have developed if Raven's electrification plans for the East Coast Main Line had come to fruition in the 1920s rather than the 1980s. Results with the first 2 engines proved satisfactory, and 3 more were ordered in February 1923, possibly in reaction to Gresley's appointment as CME of the newly formed LNER. However, before construction had begun, Gresley modified the rear bogie to have one of an A1 style. There was little difference between the A1s and the A2s when they were tested in 1923. The main difference was that the A2 did a better job of maintaining full boiler pressure. However, in October 1923, The future of the A2s was pretty much decided when 40 A1s were ordered. The A1s were considered a better design and had more scope for future development. The A2s were originally allocated to Gateshead before being moved to York in 1934. With the exception of a few visits to London King's Cross in 1923 for trial purposes, they spent the first 10 years of their lives between Grantham and Edinburgh, with some runs to Leeds. Whilst at York, they mainly ran heavy secondary express passenger services on the East Coast Main Line, although they were occasionally used on freight and mail services. From September 1929, number 2404 was fitted with a modified A1 boiler. Due to the small size of the class, it would not have been practical to build a new set of boilers, so a spare A1 boiler was used instead. Both the new boiler and the locomotive had to be modified. The firebox was extended to fit the longer A2s, and the A2 footplate had to be made wider. In 1933, the use of A3 boilers was considered, although none of the A2s were eventually fitted with them. Also, in 1933, standard Gresley 8-wheel non-corridor tenders were ordered. These replaced the original Northeastern 6-wheeled tenders in late 1934, with those tenders being fitted to the newly built J39s. A combination of their limited route availability and the need for new boilers at about the time the first V2s appeared led to the withdrawal of the class between 1936 and 1937. 4 of the original boilers were scrapped at the same time, but the 5th one from number 2400 was converted into a stationary boiler in 1937 for use at Darlington. This was scrapped in May 1939. Sadly, none of the A2s survived into preservation. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you liked it, fling a like this way. Feel free to comment down below, and if you really enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe. Thank you, and goodbye.